On this week's Political Figure episode, the Kissinger of Death has finally received the kiss of death. Today we are unfondly remembering one of history's all-time greatest genocidal maniacs, Henry fucking Kissinger. Heinz Alfred Kissinger. That's right, his name is fucking Heinz, like the condiment that also happens to be the color of the blood of innocent civilians. Just died last week, but he was born May 27th, 1923. Do you realize how fucking long ago that was? Not only does Ketchup Kissinger predate color TV, he predates fucking television. He was so fucking old that he could have literally had a conversation with Joe Biden or Mitch McConnell and unironically said the words, "Well, back in my day." Dude is so fucking old that he fled Germany with his family when he was 15 in 1938 and returned when he was 20 years old as an American GI to fight the Second World War. He died a fucking week ago. Anyway, you get the point. The man's fucking ancient, and he filled his life with a lot of really big things that mostly involved killing other people and toppling foreign governments and all kinds of diplomatic endeavors. So this is going to be the SparkNotes version of the Heinz 57 ways to commit genocidal atrocities. So Henry was a German-born Jew whose family fled Germany in the 1930s because apparently genocide's less fun when your people are on the receiving end of it. Henry graduated from George Washington High School in Manhattan and then started studying accounting at City College of New York, but got drafted into the Army in 1943 before he could graduate. Now Kissinger was a pretty smart guy and really fluent in German because he's, well, fucking German, and the Army took note and ended up putting him in the counterintelligence corps where he kind of became a spy or a special agent. So despite just being a lowly private, he ended up doing some pretty high-class badass work during the war. Hazardous intelligence work during the Battle of the Bulge, helping to liberate a concentration camp, being put in charge of the administration of an entire Allied captured city, and was put in command of denazifying an entire district, which basically just meant he went around identifying and rounding up Gestapo agents. After the war, he went and got a bachelor's in political science from Harvard, and then a master's, and then a doctor of philosophy. While doing all of that in his free time, he also helped found a magazine called Confluence and served as a consultant to the director of the Psychological Strategy Board. And if you're thinking, oh, that sounds like a nice board for the psychology department at Harvard or something, No. It was part of the program of the U.S. government figuring out fun new ways to do psychological warfare. Kissinger would remain a Harvard faculty member until 1971 in their Department of Government, and also worked as a consultant for the National Security Council. In the 1950s, he wrote a book called Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy, which basically called out President Eisenhower for being a little bitch on his nuclear warfare doctrine. Oh, almost as cold as Henry's heart out there. Which was the doctrine of massive retaliation. Basically a policy of don't start none, won't be none. But if you fuck around, you're gonna find out. The policy dictated that any nation that used military force to attack the US or its allies would receive all of the force back that we could conceivably give them, up to and including nuclear weapons. Idea being, we have the biggest fucking stick, don't make us use it. Henry Kissinger instead proposed that we use nukes all the time for everything, saying let's just use tactical nukes on a regular basis to win wars. See, this is how you know that Jewish space laser conspiracy is just anti-Semitic bullshit, because if it existed, Henry Kissinger would have been using it a long time ago. Kissinger kept getting more and more involved with the government and consulting and foreign relations, until he was eventually appointed as National Security Advisor to Richard Nixon in 1969. Initially, Kissinger wasn't a huge fan of Richard Nixon until he found out that they were both the same flavor of murderous, shady scumbag. Then they became BFFs. See, both of them really liked operating back channel, below board, behind the scenes, in secrecy. It allowed them to do all the things that they wanted to do without pesky things like morals and public opinions and ethics and humanitarian international laws getting in the way. Now, this was the middle of the Cold War, middle of Vietnam, more opportunities than ever to be doing secret shady shit. And that's not to say that there wasn't some really solid, noteworthy wins of goodish things that Henry Kissinger did as his time as National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State to Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford. This includes easing tensions with the Soviet Union, opening up new relationships with China, negotiating a eventually unsuccessful ceasefire and our eventual withdrawal from Vietnam, something they gave the fucking man a Nobel Peace Prize for. The dude was one of the biggest fucking warmongers in human history. But Alfred Nobel was the inventor of dynamite, and nobody blew shit up quite like Kissinger, so I guess it tracks. Speaking of which, the people and places Kissinger blew up. 1970, Bangladesh. Kissinger and Nixon supported the mass genocide of a few million people, all because somebody won an election that they didn't like. 1973, he overrode the Pentagon's advice and rushed weapons to Israel to help them fight Egypt, all for the sole purpose, in his own words, to isolate the Palestinians from their Arab neighbors and friends. All the shit that's going on today in large part perpetuated by Kissinger. He indirectly supported Rhodesian-backed rebels that fought a 27-year war in South Africa. Even after leaving office, he personally visited, openly praised, and supported Argentinian dictator George Rafael Rafael Videla, and said that his genocidal military rule where 30,000 of his opponents disappeared and 10,000 people died was doing a great job fighting terrorism. He defended the Chinese government for the Tiananmen Square massacre, saying that no government would tolerate that and the crackdown was inevitable. He instructed Gerald Ford to support Turkey's invasion and annexation of Cyprus, saying that the Turkey should be allowed to take what they want and negotiate from there. He advocated giving Brazil nukes. He helped plan and greenlight the covert operation in Chile to overthrow the democratic government via a coup, which involved Kissinger orchestrating the arrest of an opponent of their new dictator regime that they installed and having him assassinated via car bomb in Washington, D.C. He supported Iran in selling weapons to them and started our long-standing tradition of using the Kurds to extend our interest in the Middle East and then abandoning them when it was no longer convenient for us. In 1975, he was the reason that the Indonesian dictator was greenlit invading East Timor, an invasion that resulted in 200,000 deaths, a quarter of the population. In 1973, when it came to light that the Jewish people were being persecuted in the Soviet Union, Kissinger, who literally fled Nazi persecution in Germany to the United States, said, and I fucking quote, "The emigration of Jews from the Soviet Union is not an objective of American foreign policy. And if the Soviet Union puts Jews into the gas chamber, it's not an American concern." He said in a different conversation, out fucking loud, "If it was not for the accident of my birth, I would be anti-Semitic. Any people who has been persecuted for 2,000 years must be doing something wrong." This motherfucker won a Nobel Peace Prize. And the list goes on and on and on. But all of this pales in comparison to probably the two most monstrous things he's done, which was helping to sabotage Lyndon Johnson's peace negotiations with the North Vietnamese to help Richard Nixon win the fucking election, which likely extended the Vietnam War by another 3 or 4 years, resulting in thousands more US casualties, and an unquantifiable number of Southeast Asian casualties, not only in Vietnam, also our secret war in Laos, where we'd been covertly bombing the shit out of the country from 1964 to 1973, but most notably, Kissinger's crowning genocidal achievement that achieved nothing, the peak war crime of a career war criminal, the covert and illegal carpet bombing campaign of Cambodia. Henry intended to disrupt the movement of the North Vietnamese in Cambodia by wiping it off the map with persistent B-52 bombardments. It did not succeed in affecting the North Vietnamese movements or operations. However, the 500,000 tons of bombs dropped on Cambodia between 1969 and 73 did achieve making Cambodia the most bombed place per capita in the world ever. It resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of civilians. We don't really know because we were pretending we weren't doing it, so we weren't stopping to, worry about death tolls. Also, since we weren't at war with them, we didn't have to worry about pesky things like rules of engagement. So we could just blow up everything, like schools and hospitals and towns and villages. It was really just the spray and pray method of mass genocide. All right, General, what's our target? I don't know, just drop some bombs here, there, everywhere. If we're lucky, maybe we'll hit something. If we're really lucky, maybe we'll even hit the enemy. We dropped so many fucking bombs that Kissinger is still killing people in Cambodia today. Since 1979, at least 19,000 Cambodians have been killed by unexploded ordnances. Now, to be fair, it's not likely that all of those were US bombs. There's been a lot of conflict there over the years. There's still landmines and shit that we didn't leave there that's still there in the ground and hurting people today. But when we did drop over 250,000 bombs on the country, a fair amount of the shit that's still laying around is our stuff. Anyway, I'm almost out of time, and we haven't even gotten out of the 1970s yet. But even after he left Washington, he never really left. He opened up a consulting firm and continued getting his grubby little fingers in foreign policy and international affairs for the rest of his goddamn life. He was even an instrumental advisor for George Bush and Dick Cheney on Iraq, which checks out, doesn't it? And there is more atrocities than there is time on TikTok. But we can all rejoice in the fact that we now live in a world without Henry Kissinger. And if he's taught us anything, it's that the key to a long life is not diet, exercise, and healthy living. It's government healthcare and a genocidal lack of ethics and moral conviction. And now that we are finally rid of the Kissinger curse, may his rotten, decrepit soul keep the hellfires burning hot till we are finally rid of Dick Cheney and Mitch McConnell and all the other miserable Death Eaters and demons that keep clinging to life and ruining our world. And may his eternal damnation be filled with all the pain, suffering, and anguish Condiment Kissinger ever inflicted on an innocent soul.